Hello, and welcome into the space and into the room. I have been receiving all kind of positive feedback from you all about your experience and how much you're enjoying the sessions. And I just want to let you know that has been what's helped me heal. I know that was the question that we had in the read the feed, kind of how do you heal? Being with you all. Getting that feedback, learning what works for you and what doesn't work so well. Like that helps me heal and feel good because as you can imagine, this has been a major, huge lift. So it feels good to know that you all are having a positive experience and it motivates me. And I wanted to make sure that we all got the graphic summary of Kalechi's presentation that's here. This is also in the resource on the resource tab and in our resource library. So if you want to download it, maybe save it, you can do that. We have this graphic illustration for all of our keynote presentations. So I want to shout out Yin, who's here with us behind the scenes, creating and producing these graphic illustrations. So shout out to her. I see some hand claps going out. So shout out to Yen for doing an awesome job and helping us take notes and do it beautifully. I also want to shout out our our awardees. I said earlier that we have the first ever System of Care Champion Award ceremony happening today, right after this session. And I want to shout out our call to action to Beth Jordan. Shout out to Beth. Congratulations. Please help me to congratulate Beth. Let's celebrate the path that she's blazing as a System of Care Innovator Award. We're going to do some more talking with Beth in a little bit. And then our next awardee that I'd like to shout out on the screen here is if we could share that one. There we go. Thank you, Jay Rose. Congratulations to Jay Rose as our System of Care Young Adult Champion Award awardee. And so we are going to celebrate all of our awardees in just a few minutes. And I hope that you all plan to stay and let's honor them together. Before that, we are going to have a fantastic and phenomenal presentation. Trauma and healing will be the main topic. And I'm going to pass it over to Mike uh, to introduce our speaker.
Okay, I realize I have to have my mic and camera open. So this is a real honor for me. Um, we don't have to look far to see communities addressing trauma at various levels. For me personally, I'm in Texas, and the place where the Allen shooting was is just down the road from my house. And someone very close to me was in the store and it had to experience some sights and sounds and smells and visions that are just terrible. And so having Dr. Singer present is something that, for me personally, I'm just incredibly grateful for. A little bit of full disclosure, I've worked indirectly with Dr. Singer through the Brazelton Touchpoint Center. Uh, Jane is a PhD. She's a clinical psychologist. She is endorsed infant and early childhood mental health clinical mentor, and she's at the Brazelton Touchpoint Center, which is a division of Boston's Children's Hospital. And I just have to say a little bit about that. This is certainly not an advertisement for him, but 15 years ago, when I was directing a system of care, it was an early childhood system of care. I was lucky enough to have Dr. Brazelton, Josh Sparrow, and Maria Trozzi come to do a training for our system of care. It just so happened that the day before that, there was a school shooting. And I was struck by the kindness and the grace that they gave us coming into our community and saying, hey, do you need us to go to the school? What do you need? Let us support you. That is what the type of people that are ingrained in the or a part of the faculty at this institution. And when I see her from time to time in our meetings, I'm always struck by not only her kindness, but her presence. When you are sharing something in a meeting, she is present. And so I could go on, but it is just a real honor for me to introduce Jane Singer, our presenter this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Mike. And thank you to the entire committee that invited me to be a part of this very important conference. I am honored and humbled by the invitation and very happy to be here with you. While I bring up my slideshow, and hopefully that will, oh, look at that, it actually worked. Excellent. So while I bring up my slides, I will invite you all to join me in coming down to earth after that beautiful introduction by Mike. And I'll come down to earth by sharing a little bit of a story with you that I'm not so proud of. I have been working with children and families for more than 40 years in a lot of different roles, responsibilities. But the story I'll share with you ever so briefly happened, oh gosh, probably about 25 years ago. And I had just spent the day in court advocating for a child who was in my care, meaning that I was his primary psychotherapist in a day treatment program. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but suffice it to say that this child, at the age of 6 or 7 years old, he was at the time, had a case file filled with descriptions of every bad thing that can happen to a human being. So I had spent the day in court advocating for his needs and came home at the end of the day. I had missed dinner, and I had one child at the time. He was already in the bathtub. My husband was already giving him a bath. And when I hit the door of my apartment, I just kept thinking, oh, I cannot wait to be home. I cannot wait to be with my child, my family, and recover from a very difficult day. So I come in, I find my son and my husband in the bathroom, my husband giving my son a bath. My son was about 3 years old. And I come in and I say, hey guys, how are you? Because I'm needing to be filled back up. And my little son says to me, by way of answering how he is, there weren't any ice cream sandwiches for dessert. Now, we could spend the whole rest of the hour together exploring how little patience I had in that moment for that complaint on the part of my son. What started as my reply was, did you know there are some children who have never had an ice cream sandwich? And quickly became, and might not ever have an ice cream sandwich? And within a minute had turned into a full-on brain dump from me that landed with me saying things like, and don't have mommies and don't have daddies and don't have places to live and don't know where they're going to be living. So if you've ever seen a vaudeville show with the idea of there being a hook that pulls somebody off the stage, that's what was happening in my bathroom that evening. My husband stepped out of the bathroom into the hallway and said, Jane, can I see you for a minute? I stepped out into the hallway and he said, what the hell? And I just looked at him and I said, I can't be here yet. And I excused myself and I went off by myself and put myself back together again after this day, and came back to be with my son, who's of course calling after me. Who doesn't have a mommy? Who doesn't have a house? Where are they going to live? Yeah, like I said, not my proudest moment. And I came back in to him in a little while and I apologized to him. And I said, Mommy, I'm feeling sad because I know someone at work who's very, very sad. And I said, but don't you worry, because that's what part of my job is helping him to find a place to live. And we are going to find him a place to live. And turned around and tried to give my little one his own sense of hope about the world. My point being that the work that we do is very difficult emotionally. There is a such thing as vicarious and secondary trauma. When we work with stories day in and day out about experiences that children and families have had, are still having, that really rip at our hearts. And so I'm grateful to all of you today for sharing this hour with me. Even more so, I'm grateful to all of you for the work that you all do for and with children and families, and knowing that that you bring your whole selves into the work, and we all come to the work for our own reasons, and we deserve support for and from each other. And so today, I'm going to explore a few main ideas with each other about some of the main influences upon how young children develop, and then turn the corner and thinking about how those influences become complicated by stress, toxic levels of stress, right, and trauma, and how we're all here in service of supporting everyone's mental health, social and emotional well-being. Yes, the children and families we serve, but also our own, so that we can continue to do this important work. And that requires reflection, and it requires reflective partners. Who do we have to turn to engage in a process that explores the emotionality of our work and confronts the emotional stress and the impact of the work? So I will preview that today we'll be exploring some content, some ideas that may well remind any one of us of stress we have experienced. And of course, your well-being is also very important to me, to us. And we'll certainly understand whatever it is that you need to do to tend to your own self during the course of this talk. We are asking of ourselves to engage in self-awareness as a critical relationship-based strategy in meeting the needs of children and families. Self-awareness, one of the foundational tenets in the diversity-informed tenets for work with infants, children, and families. And we deserve relationships in order to engage in that level of self-awareness. So I'm inviting you to do some of that with me today, and trusting and hoping that each and every one of you have at least one reflective partner in your professional and your personal lives to be able to explore the impact of this work. You know, Donald Winnicott said decades ago that there is no such thing as a baby, right? A baby is always exists in the context of a relationship with at least one other person. Bronfenbrenner reminded us, right, that babies, young children, need at least one adult to fall hopelessly in love with them in order to thrive, right, emotionally. and that adults who have a child, parents, need at least one other adult who is championing them as a parent. And for many of us, sometimes we are that one person, that one other adult for the family, for the parent who is rearing a child. So we are here as much in service of children and families as we are in service of our own emotions, our own reactions, our own behaviors, and our own intentions. We need to be aware of our emotions and reactions in order to behave with intention. I shared the story I did with you because my intention had been to come home, stop thinking about my day, and just enjoy the simple pleasures of life, giving my 3-year-old a bath, right? And one little comment from him about not having an ice cream sandwich, right, was enough for me to realize, well, I didn't realize at first, for me to feel triggered and to go into a diatribe about the injustices of the world, right? I will tell you that a few months after that same story, about 6 months later, it was Christmas Eve. The little boy at work who I was supporting, I had been successful in finding a pre-adoptive home for him. And on Christmas Eve, his pre-adoptive mother passed away. And I got a call from a couple of other people in the system. And my same son found me in the kitchen. This is way before cell phones. I'm tethered to a phone line, and found me by myself in the kitchen crying. And when he found me, he said, why are you crying on Christmas? And once again, my emotions, my reactions really informed my behavior before my intentions. And before I knew it, I said to him, well, I know a child at work whose mommy died. And my son at 3.5, without skipping a beat, said, well, he should come and live with us. Which of course he did not. But my point being, right, that we do have the ability to be self-aware and to also cultivate compassion and self-awareness in others. But it needs to be in good measure, right? And we need support in order to do that. So I'm going to ask all of you, I'm not going to ask you for your stories. I'm not going to ask you in chat to share what it is that I'm about to ask you to think about, but I am going to ask you to pull into mind a time of your own vulnerability, a time of your own life. Maybe it was personal, maybe it was personal, of a time that you went through your own period of vulnerability. And now I'm going to ask you to think about who was there for you, who was helpful to you, and what was it about them that was helpful? When we went through our own period of vulnerability, who was a support? Who was strong for us when maybe we were not feeling like we could cope with what it is that we were being given to hold and to handle? What was it about them that was helpful? Again, I'm not necessarily asking you to share, okay? But just give it some thought. Who was there for you? If you had to make a list of adjectives about them, what would those adjectives be that described what it was about what they did, what they said, what they didn't do, what they didn't say, that you felt to be helpful to you in your own vulnerability. And keep that list in your mind, because I am guessing that the kinds of things that are coming to your mind is that the person who was helpful to you listened, was present, did not judge, did not question you, right? I would venture a guess that in our periods of vulnerability, when we might feel really dysregulated, that the person who was most helpful to us stayed calm in the face of our dysregulation, right? Had faith in our ability to cope with what was being asked of us, right? It's a reminder to all of us when we're thinking about healing and resilience in the face of trauma, that relationships, just like relationships are the foundation of development, relationships are the foundation of support through the hard times, right? And giving us a vision of the future where healing is possible. Relationships are the source of support. They're the source of social and emotional health for all of us. And relationships offer us fuel for development, first and foremost, and fuel for coping and resilience throughout our lives. So, how does this have to do with development? And I know there was a question that came in ahead of time, ahead of my presentation, about developmental trauma. And so whoever it was that asked that question, I'm going to really ask you to think about this right now. We want to remind ourselves that under the best of circumstances, all of development, whether we're talking about a child's cognitive problem solving, their communication skills, their motor skills, even their ability to physically thrive, all of that is embedded in their social emotional development. And of course, that social emotional development and well-being is nested in the culture and system of caregiving relationships. Okay, so what does that have to do with what I just asked you about when I asked you to think about your own times of vulnerability and who was there for you? Well, what it has to do with it is that we are here in service of supporting children's social and emotional health, right? From the very start, we're here in service of supporting children in the development of their basic trust in their own emotions, basic trust in other people, their ability to build relationships, their ability to build their village, to connect with others, to repair the disconnections that will naturally occur in genuine, authentic relationships. In those foundational relationships, the child is co-regulated, just like we, even as adults, were co-regulated by at least one other person in relationship with us when we felt dysregulated. And the child's experience of being co-regulated in a relationship leads to their ability to self-regulate. All of that combines to build in a child a strong and healthy sense of self, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-agency, self-identity, a sense of self-value, a sense of self-worth. And that is what we wish for every single child born on the face of this earth, right? And these foundations of emotional competence that we're building in children, those are the same competencies that we are using when we support children and families. Those are the same emotional competencies that I hope all of you have experienced from at least one other person in your life. Here's the thing about development, though, is that children come into the world as our partners in building those social emotional competencies and strengths. They don't come into the world as a blank slate. They come into the world with competencies that by nature are equipping the baby, right, to help put into motion those main social emotional competencies, the ability to be in relationship, the ability to self-regulate, building towards the sense of self. So look at this little one who is hours old and how competent this little one is. If you can let yourself stare deeply into his eyes and imagine yourself being the parent of this newborn, and what the skills are that we see the baby literally reaching out across the screen and pulling us into relationship with him. He is born with skill, the ability to make eye contact and look deeply into the eyes of the other person, inviting us into relationship. That's pretty exciting and stimulating for a young child. So in order to stay in relationship, connection, and serve in return that build this baby's brain, the baby also needs to self-regulate and hear it, right? It's exciting to meet the face person you've been listening to for the last trimester of pregnancy. And in the face of that excitement, he gets his hands to his mouth. That helps him stay regulated so he can stay responsive. And despite our society's bad reputation about crying, children also come into the world naturally able to feel their emotions and express their emotions, communicate their needs. If children did not cry, right, they would not survive. They would not be signaling that they need something. So, children come into the world with skills and competencies to build their relationships and to build their sense of self. Now, we know that some of those skills are inborn from a child's central nervous system. They come into the world and they mature over time. That's this line going up through the middle. All through development, no matter what it is that a child is working on developmentally, they have an internal experience of themselves. It feels really good to master a new skill. Children are driven, right, towards mastery and control, right? Skill after skill after skill. They have to experience some frustration along the way. And of course, they also have to eventually learn that they cannot be in control of everything, right? That's part of learning to be in a society. But all along the way, they have an experience of themselves as they have the urge to work on their skills. And they have an experience of everything and everybody going on around them who's responding to their behavior. We could also spend the rest of the time, if not days on end, talking with each other about all the things that go on in the child's external world that influence developmental process. The parent's ability to encourage the child, celebrate when the child develops a new skill, sure, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Everything that's ever happened to the family, to the parent, to the parent's family, community, society, is also an ingredient that affects the parent's response to the child's behavior. Trauma being one of those influences. Could be individual trauma, could be societal trauma, right? Could be historical oppression and racism, could be an individual event in the life of the parent. Could be all of those things are going to influence this external feedback as an influence upon the child's development. And so, if we are here in service of healing and resilience, we want skills that help us live right here in the moment at the intersection of all of these influences upon a child's developmental trajectory? Well, the thing is about the central nervous system is that children will get an idea before they have the skill to act on the idea. And then the last thing to develop is judgment. So think about the impact of that upon parents who are trying to figure out, why is it that I have to tell my child this 1,000 times? Yep, because the judgment piece is the last piece to develop well into our 20s, by the way, before our prefrontal cortex is mature. Yeah, but this process affects the parent-child relationship. And if the parent-child relationship is also happening in the context of trauma, either historical trauma for the parent or for the community, right, that might affect how the adults around the child respond to the fact that the child's judgment is not there yet. So we're talking about this idea of the striving for control being what's driving development. And guess what? Nature also provides that the way to develop being in control is by getting out of control. What? Some of you might be thinking, what am I saying? Yes, in order for children to develop self-control over time, they have to practice. And the way that they practice is by getting out of control. I'm just letting that sink in for a second, because children out of control have a really tricky rep in our society. All right. Now what? We've been talking about control and children striving to be in control, parents and children striving together to help the child learn self-control. But sometimes parents feel out of control when their child gets out of control. What about if that's greatly amplified by experiences that are so out of control, right, that they really affect the functioning of the child and the family? So I'm bringing into mind the 3 E's of trauma, and this comes out of SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration definition of trauma, the 3 E's. There are events, and then there are the experiences of those events. Not every one of us will experience the same event in the same way, by temperament, because of history. And then there are the effects of those experiences. Well, we can assume, right, that trauma, right, a level of experience in which someone has felt really out of control, right, is the experience of an event that actually causes harm or threatens to cause harm to a person's emotional or physical well-being. And we can also assume that children's responses to those experiences are designed to help the child survive and get to safety, right? The child's response to trauma is their attempt to get back into control and have that sense of mastery and control. But over time, those responses can get embedded into a way of being, a way of experiencing, and a way of relating to the world. Over time, the fear that occurs and that sense of being out of control that occurs from being in a traumatic circumstance or circumstances over time, that fear, unless supported through a healing relationship, right, can over time develop into a sense of sadness, a sense of rage, an absence of feeling. right? Trauma interferes with our human beings' ability to trust others as well as to trust ourselves. And over time, this really interferes with our human beings' ability to be authentic in our relationships. Well, over time, you put enough adverse childhood experiences together, if you're familiar with the ACEs literature, you put enough adverse childhood experiences together over the course of childhood, and you have acutely increased odds of developing an emotional health concern, a mental health disorder, an anxiety disorder, a substance use disorder, an impulse control disorder. And that's only in the face of 4 adverse childhood experiences. So I'm going to ask all of you now to think about a child who you might know, whose behavior feels really extreme. And you think or you know that trauma has been part of their experience. And think of just a word. What's the first word that you think of when you think of that child's behavior? All right. And as you're thinking about that, and you can put that in your chat if you'd like. I can't see the chat, so Ashley, I'll ask you if there are words that come through if you want to tell me. But think of the words that you think of, like, oh, I know a child, I feel like their behavior is really extreme, intense, the behavior frequent, intense, the duration is long.
Yeah,
Did you want to say something, Ashley? Please.
yes, communication, aggressive, eruption, hurt, isolation, bad, scared, scared again, not being social, misunderstood, disorganized, uncontrollable, struggling, intense, triggering,
Yes.
escalating.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ashley. And I'm going to ask all of us to shift our mind together, right? When we say dysregulated, right, explosive, to consider that is an adaptive response on the part of the child. That child is trying to get back into control. And the developmental urge to do that means getting out of control first, to then master getting back into control. And that's going to affect everybody in the system around the child, including us, right? So everything that's happening inside the child's developmental process that changes behavior and caregiving routines affects everybody else, and vice versa. And again, if trauma is the visitor, so to speak, in any one of these people's lives, that will affect the response to the child, and the child's experience of trauma will affect the child's response to anybody else in the system. So I just want to introduce a couple of ideas about the Brazelton touch points approach, which is a way of understanding development in a very particular manner and using that way of understanding development in a strengths-based way as our primary family engagement technique in service of optimal development, in service of healing and resilience. Here's the key concept. Development is not smooth and linear. No matter what the milestone charts look like, and milestone charts are important, don't get me wrong, right? But development does not occur just easily, one skill after the next, and instead, development is characterized by regressions before those bursts. Some of you might be saying, what? Regression? That's a dirty word in the world of development. Regression just means a temporary step backwards. That's what we mean by a touch point. So a quick example, child's learning to walk, brand new motor skill. It's a huge, momentous time of a child's life to realize they can be upright and move with their own sense of control and mastery. Well, guess what? As they're learning the new skill, right, their other areas of development might take a temporary backslide. The child who's learning to walk, right, during that time might not use their words. The child who's learning to walk, for example, their sleep might fall apart, feeding might fall apart. And then, guess who else's sleep is falling apart? Not us if we're working outside of the family system, but with the family system, right? If the child's falling apart in their caregiving routines, that means the people who are closest to the child at home are also having their routines falling apart. Sleep, right? If the child's sleep falls apart, so does the parent, right? If the sleep is falling apart enough, what happens to the mood in the family? How does that affect interactions? And here's something that we lose sight of. Childhood abuse. Incidents of childhood abuse are tied to developmental process. Sleeping, feeding, toileting, limit setting, right? The incidents of abuse, neglect, are in response to periods of dysregulation in the child's developmental process that overly tax the parent and their ability to regulate themselves with their child. The little boy who I mentioned before, who I had gone to court for, his earliest memory was being hungry and crying in his crib. He remembers being hungry for eggs, right? And calling out for eggs. He wanted eggs. And the response was that his father came into the room and picked him up and threw him against the wall. It's a breakdown, right, in the ability of the parent to regulate themselves in response to the child's developmental need. And it begs the question, what did that parent not have in their own experience of being attuned and cared for in how they were parented, right? So we want to break these intergenerational cycles, and we want to do it by coming alongside parents and children in recognizing that within the course of typical development, there will be periods of disorganization. Those are the touch points. Those are necessary periods of stress, a positive form of stress, hopefully at the most tolerable levels of stress, where the parent has to learn who the new child is, right? Enough friction that the child experiences themselves as a separate person. And if there's enough guidance ahead of time and enough relationship to support the parent, to support their child, they come through the periods of disorganization with a healthy relationship and repair some of the disconnections that, of course, are going to happen in that friction. What we're trying to do is prevent derailment, a toxic level of stress. Well, for many of us, the children and families who we're working with have already gotten themselves into cycles of a toxic level of stress. And there, in service of healing, we want to come alongside before the next period of disorganization, right? To help the parent anticipate when stress might peak and help feel prepared in their own ability to regulate themselves. So, what we know about development is that when there is a toxic level of stress, that experience is embedded in the child's developmental process, right? If the trauma is experienced by a baby, it could affect their development of basic trust. By the 2-year-old, affect their ability to develop beyond basic trust into a sense of autonomy. The 3-year-old, right? If they're bursting in their imagination, they'll make lots of magical connections about why the traumatic experiences occurred. Right? Every developmental stage will tell us something about how the child might experience trauma. So think back to that child who I asked you to think about before, whose development whose behavior seemed extreme. And think about them, what it is that they're doing, what you've witnessed, what you've heard. What age would that child, that same child, need to be for that same behavior that feels extreme for their age to not seem so extreme? Meaning, what touch point is that child regressing way back to in the period of stress? What part of their social emotional competency, their basic trust, ability to be in a relationship, their self-regulation, their sense of self, our 3 big goals, did they not have the opportunity to consolidate, to galvanize during an earlier stage of development? So now, when they're older and they hit stress, they don't just go through a temporary period of regression. They regress way back to the period of development that they did not master in the first place. And so our goal is to understand the developmental process that happens when there's a context of trauma, because the traumatic events, experiences, and effects can affect a person physically, emotionally, cognitively, relationally. And that looks different depending on how old the child is, right? We can get a fight, flight, or freeze response in an infant. We can get the fight, flight, or freeze response in a child who's older than infancy. And we want to understand those behaviors, not just as symptoms of PTSD, right? But it's telling us that that child is trying desperately to engage in their developmental process. Even as a child gets older and can engage mentally in trying to understand trauma. Why did this happen? How is it? Am I going to be safe? Is my family going to be safe? Right? Those acute responses are embedded in their developmental process. And we want to move in as quickly, as early, as intensively as possible to help prevent those early childhood experiences from developing over time into a negative worldview, all the way into adulthood. And I'm sure, Ashley, did you want to say something?
Yep, I'm sorry. Doing the gentle interruption to ask the question that's in the Q&A.
Please.
Okay, so there's a question here. Mackenzie asked, would this be considered developmental trauma?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So if you're the same person who submitted yes, this is developmental trauma, right? All of us have a personhood that we've developed over the course of our lifetime, right? If trauma has affected our developmental process, we may very well see into adulthood a worldview, a way of being, a way of responding, a way of feeling triggered, a way of trusting or not trusting, right? So if I said to all of you, right, think of an adult in your life who has been pretty difficult to get to know or be in relationship with. What might we imagine, or sometimes we know, right? If somebody has a hard time trusting others, we can usually pretty safely assume they have a pretty good reason, right? So yes, this is developmental trauma. The question that had come in ahead of time had asked about the DSM-5 and developmental trauma. And I would strongly encourage folks to become familiar with the DC 0 to 5, the diagnostic and classification system that was published out of 0 to 3 for understanding behavior in children from birth to 5 years old, because that has a much richer way of understanding cultural context influence of relationships, developmental status of the child, all in understanding the impact of trauma and how that will look like behavior that can feel extreme and look extreme, but really is the child's adaptive attempt at mastery and control in response, in reaction to having experiences that they were not in control of, that they felt that they could not cope with. And so, a little bit of anticipatory guidance. In about 4 minutes, I'm going to stop and take questions. Please know that in your handout, there's additional slides, because I'm going to get through, a few more comments. But those additional slides that are in your handout offer up some more resources for exploring these ideas. Healing. Development happens in the context of relationships. Healing happens in the context of relationships, right? We want to offer up to children and families, individuals, relationships that feel safe, that feel predictable, that feel attuned, not with perfection, because we know that there will be mismatch in authentic relationships, but relationships that help the child recover by having a consistent experience of feeling that they are worthy, that they are nurtured, that they are loved, that they have value. And we can help children and adults who have experienced trauma by identifying the emotional state of the person who may very well be engaging in things that make us feel uncomfortable, maybe even make us feel angry, upset, right? But understanding the effect of trauma on that person's way of being in the world leads to higher levels of empathy in us, right? Which is absolutely necessary. Yes, limits need to be set on behaviors that are not safe, don't get me wrong. But empathy for the whole child, for the whole person, right? And the practices that we can engage in service of healing and resilience are both prevention-based, right? Getting out ahead of the next touch point before that next period of disorganization happens and anticipating that peak in stress, and understanding the behavior as communicating to us about what the child needs. How do we need to help go back in time and help the child to learn some of those emotional competencies, basic trust, the ability to be in relationship, build connection and repair disconnection, take in co-regulation in service of developing self-regulation, all building towards sense of self. Well, sometimes we have to regress, let the child's behavior regress in service of still feeling loved, valued, cared for, understood, empathized with as they go through their period of disorganization. So repetition, right? Having the child dysregulate and be cared for and tended to over and over and over again in positive relationships really help the child to foster a positive sense of mastery and control. And when we identify the person's strategies as adaptive to their trauma, we can also help people understand their own reactions, that where did that come from? Again, that child who I told you about before, who I had gone to court for, the very first time I ever came to his classroom in his day treatment program, I was about a minute late. I couldn't believe it, right? I already knew what his history was. I started working with him when he was 5. And I had met him briefly before. We had made the plan. I came to his classroom. I was about a minute late, and he went under his desk. Once he came out in the hallway, I said, you were watching the clock, weren't you? You were expecting me right at whatever the time was. And when I wasn't there, you thought, here we go. Here's going to be another adult who is not going to live up to their promises. And then off he went with me, right? Feeling understood. And we are here in service of building that capacity to express emotions, feel emotions. There are no such thing as negative emotions. There are emotions that make us feel more or less comfortable, right? But really supporting children in physically safe, emotionally safe relationships that require us, guess what, to practice our own ability to stay calm and self-regulated so that we're modeling emotional competency. Yes, routines. Yes, predictability. Yes, Ashley, please.
Yes, so I think that ties in really nicely to the next question. How do you let people in your life, who have outbursts and heal while holding your boundaries? So this question is about holding your boundaries and how difficult it can be.
Yeah, so now we're talking about the boundary between our personal lives and our professional lives, right? In our professional lives, we may very well tolerate, even celebrate the opportunities for children to dysregulate in our presence and come alongside and wait it out with them. We might, that's part of our job, and it has a cost. In our personal lives, right? We may understand, we may even convey that we understand. I know that you're trying to see if I'm going to stick around, even if you do X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to tell you where my limits are, right? I refuse to get hurt. I will not tolerate being hurt, right? So the question is an excellent one. And of course, we're not going to tolerate getting hurt in a professional relationship either, right? But setting the boundary it pulls us all the way back down into that developmental process again, right? Toddlers in their developmental process, in service of learning to have self-control, they get out of control. And parenting, caregiving, right, doesn't just let that happen. We give safe space. Hey, you know what? If you're going to do that, we're going to go over to this safe place. We're going to leave the store. We're going to go into your bed. Right? We put parameters around it so that the child learns self-control, but also learns that they don't control everybody else, right? What we're trying to avoid is the child developing that sense that I am bad. These bad things happen to me because I am bad and the world is out to get me. And the question, Ashley, I think that you just shared with me might have come from somebody who has at least one adult in their life who made it all the way into their adult life with that. The world is out to get me. I owe the world nothing. And, I will test to see who's willing to put up with me. Well, in our personal lives, we may need to set boundaries around that, right? So I know that we're coming up on the end, but I just want to preview for all of you that some of the resources that I have in the slides for you are calming and self-regulation activities for children, but guess what? They are great activities for us to practice as adults, and they're great activities to coach families to practice individually, parents, and with each other. Because what we want to do is make sure to remember that coping strategies are adaptive, right? They're not just maladaptive symptoms of PTSD. Every child, every adult is doing the best they can at any given moment. That change is going to be very, very slow and steady in small steps. That trust has to be earned again and again and again. That, of course, you can make a huge child in the child's huge difference in the child's future, and that coping strategies are telling us about where the child is in their developmental process. So I am going to actually stop sharing there and tell one. Oh, no, I can't. We're at 5 o'clock. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Jane. There was one other question in the chat, or I'm not sure if you would have an opportunity to maybe respond to those questions there, but there are two other questions that we didn't have time to get to, but we appreciate you leaving those questions. And Jane, we appreciate you so much for this presentation. There were so many comments about how soothing your voice has been.
I'll be sure to tell my children that.
About this topic. Yen is going to share a quick summary, a graphical summary of your presentation, Jane. And to see this full screen again, remember, just hit the square in the corner there with 4 arrows, and you can see it in full screen. Awesome. Thank you so much, Yen, for those notes. These will be available in the resource library. And now we are going to move right directly into our award ceremony. This is our first year doing this, y'all, and I'm so excited that we have the opportunity to honor, celebrate, and congratulate champions across the nation doing the good work, doing the hard work. So super excited for this opportunity. And like I said earlier, our awardees, they're going to share about their work that they do. They're going to say their thanks. They're going to give their remarks. They'll thank Fluffy. Somebody said, well, what's wrong with Fluffy? They'll thank Fluffy and their moms, but they're also going to use this opportunity as a teaching moment to share more about what they do and how they do it in their part of the world. So let's kick things off by celebrating the System of Care Youth Champion Award recipient. This award recognizes a young person between the ages of 16 and 21 who has mental health lived experience and advocates for and supports other young people. And I'm excited to say that our 2023 Youth Champion is, you already know, Rick Yang. Congratulations, Rick. Rick is a high school student, a mental health activist, civic entrepreneur, and community health researcher. After noticing that the stigma around mental health in his school community was preventing access to care and support, Rick began developing campaigns on his own with a team of other students for destigmatization of mental health and advocating for improvement of mental health support systems of care. Starting with his very own school community. Together with his peers, Rick collaborated with school mental health leaders and administrators to design and implement a campus-wide mental health promotion and support campaign. Rick is definitely a shining example of a youth mental health champion. So congratulations to Rick. Rick, we'd love to hear more about your work and what you do.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here this afternoon. Extremely grateful, of course, to be nominated for this award. Obviously, I just wanted to start off by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to the conference organizers. This amazing summit would not exist without the work you've put in. Also to the selection committee, I know that recognizing me for this award comes from a place of great understanding in the importance of mental health, especially in our younger generations. Obviously, I would like to thank my mentors and colleagues who have been instrumental in my journey, as well as my family for their unending support, patience, and love. Over the years, one critical lesson that I wanted to share is the role of youth voices in shaping mental health discourse and policy. Youth are not just the recipients of mental health services, but they are the ones living the experience, navigating the systems we put in place, and facing the challenges head on. And I've learned that their insights and perspectives are invaluable. However, the inclusion of youth voices is not just about giving them a platform to speak, It's about really listening to and valuing their input and incorporating insights into their decision-making processes. If we genuinely want to make a difference, we must not only allow, but actively encourage younger people to speak up. We have to create environments where they feel safe to express their thoughts, their struggles, and their ideas, and treat them as equal partners, not just beneficiaries, but facilitators of change in mental health conversations. So here's a piece of advice for organizations and policymakers. Create platforms and opportunities for youth to express their views and then actually use their input in decision-making processes. This could be in the form of youth advisory boards, inclusion in policy discussions, or just providing feedback on services. Because the lesson I want to share is that youth voice matters. We have to encourage it, foster it, listen to it, and most importantly, act upon it. Let's not just make decisions for our youth, but with our youth, because after all, they're not just our future, but also our present. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rick. You took us to church. I love it. Our 2023 Young Adult Champion is Jay Rose, and Jay could not join us here today, but that doesn't mean we're not going to celebrate them. Our Young Adult Champion Award highlights a young person between the ages of 22 to 29 who advocates for the mental health and wellness of their community and other young people. Even though Jay couldn't join us, they were nominated for their leadership in their community and then as a mentor, especially during the pandemic. Their nominator wrote, as a young adult for a regional family youth system partner roundtable, Jay identified issues, both through experience and research, that helped guide the organization toward meaningful action in the community. Jay was instrumental in helping their community during the pandemic and took initiative to both identify and then go on to mentor other young leaders to step in as Jay stepped up into new roles as an adult. Congratulations, Jay. We're sorry you couldn't be with us, but we're so excited for all the good work that you're doing in your community.
Yes, Jay. We wish that you could be here. Jay got a new position as a peer support specialist. So shout out to Jay and the new job opportunity, right? And the next award recognizes an individual who is driving efforts to improve the mental health system of care for children, young adults, and families with diverse racial, ethnic, linguistic, sexual orientation, and or gender identities. And our 2023 Equity Champion is Nada Wicketsaid. So let's give it up for Nada. Nada was nominated by a colleague for her partnership on a citywide economic justice and wellness grant supporting Chicago's BIPOC, transgender, and gender nonconforming communities. She is the founder of Come Back to Care, a social parenting and inner child reparenting program for social justice, curious and conscious parents, and the host of the Come Back to Care podcast, which I've listened to episodes. Y'all, it's amazing. You gotta listen to that podcast, okay? Nada teaches on topics like the connection of intergenerational trauma, structural oppression, and the connection to mental health outcomes in ways that are approachable, that's important, healing, and culturally relevant. So please join us as we celebrate and support Nada as she continues to improve equitable and healing-centered mental health outcomes for her community. We're super excited to hear from you, Nada. I'll pass the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley, Yasmina, Gay, and everyone who's sticking around. Thank you so much for this award and for hosting the summit. I started my equity journey back in 2007, and I didn't know what equity meant at the time. The only thing I knew was the government was not going to provide for us and for my transgender sex worker community and family back in Thailand. And for sure that patriarchy, colonialism, and capitalism would not witness our dignity and our humanity. So we did what we had to do to make sure that we were taken care of and we loved one another. And to me, equity, it's not a nice thing to do. It's not a strategy. Equity is the liberation that my ancestors could only hope for. Equity is the healing that they couldn't get to do. Equity is something that I need to do to survive. So I'm here to say that equity, it's not the end goal. Equity is the start for our collective liberation. And I want to speak to those who are in the back. And I think I know who you are. Those of us who have been taking risk to disrupt any silence, to take a stand. Those of us who have been taking meaningful action and choosing that meaningful and real action over silence. And those of us who have been holding space and taking up space. Our voice, our presence, and our action are so powerful. And I know that you already know that. And because of you, I think this award means so much. And I'm so honored to be doing this work alongside you and on the stolen land of the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. Let us keep building together, making mistakes together, and then repairing them for the next 7 generations. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Nada. I feel like that was just such a mic drop moment. I just want to let it simmer for a second. Whew. Thank you for that. What a way, just what a good reminder of choosing meaningful action over silence. And I think that we're going to find that really exemplified in our next awardee. The next awardee recognizes a family member, guardian, or caregiver of a young person who has experience of mental health challenges, who also advocates for and supports other families. This year's Family Champion awardee is Claire Higgins. Give it up in the chat. Let's drop those memes. I was going to say gifts, but I can't decide. Claire is the program director for the family and youth teams at Hope Works Incorporated in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Claire has consistently demonstrated a commitment to uniting families, young adults, providers, and the community. She's helped our community secure funding to connect families who are in need with trained family peer support partners in real time during crisis situations. She also leads multiple programs that exclusively employ and hire individuals with lived experience or caregivers of children with lived experience navigating the child serving systems. Claire embodies the system of care values by collaborating with schools, providers, and community, where she often connects families with her program and other community supports available. Join us as we celebrate and support Claire. And Claire, if you would like to show your video and unmute your microphone, you can share with us your remarks or your teachable moment now.
Thank you. Wow, that was a tough act to follow. I needed to take a moment after her speech as well. So thank you very much for that. So hello, everybody. I want to start by thanking the NTTAC and the System of Care Award Committee for recognizing me this year. I'm sure that there were many, many worthy candidates, and I'm truly honored to be chosen. So thank you. I also want to thank Montgomery County, Pennsylvania Department of Health and Human Services for partnering with us as funding program funders, and also for supporting us in a vision where all family serving systems value the importance of family voice and choice. We are very fortunate to live in a county that supports us in the work that we do. I also need to thank my incredible team of peers and peer supervisors who are all fully invested in this journey with me. There is absolutely, positively no way that I could do this work without the dedicated group of people that I have with me every day. Their personal stories of hope and resilience inspire me. Their dedication to uplifting family voice and youth voice is unparalleled. They are my reflective partners that Jane spoke about earlier, and I am immeasurably grateful for each and every one of them. Finally, I want to thank my family, for without them, I wouldn't be where I am today. I would not be doing the work I do. I thank them for our beautiful life and for their understanding, sensitivity, and resilience in the face of adversity, and for joining with me to use our family's experiences to inspire and uplift others. So I'm a little wordy. I'm going to try to speak quickly, but in order to share the lesson I've learned, I want to tell a little story. So last summer we went to our local co-op, and we found this little black and white and yellow caterpillar on a patch of dillweed. I'm a huge critter lover. I save all the little animals, and I was so excited to find this little guy. When I was little, I raised monarchs, and he looked just like the caterpillars that I used to raise when I was small. And so I thought, gosh, I wonder how he ended up on dillweed, because monarchs only eat milkweed, and he was on dill. So I thought, I'm going to fix this little guy. I'm going to take him home. I'm going to make things better for him. So we scooped him up. We went out and we found some milkweed. We brought it home. We transferred him to a brand new habitat. And it was full of brand new fresh milkweed and bright light. And we were anxiously anticipating his excitement as he got ready to eat and grow. We named him Pickle because he was on dillweed. He had a name. However, he wouldn't eat. We tried washing the leaves. We gave him smaller ones. We moved him to a different habitat. We spoke to him nicely about how important it was for him to eat, and nothing worked. But I knew if he just ate that milkweed, he would thrive and grow like the other monarchs. And I was devastated to think that everything I was doing to help him wasn't working. The last thing I wanted was for him to languish. So the next morning, the milkweed was still untouched. However, my daughter noticed that a small sprig of dill that had made it into the way into his habitat had actually been eaten. I was confused because I kept saying monarchs eat milkweed and not dill. And why is he eating dill? And then I realized that we actually hadn't found a monarch. We had actually found a swallowtail. And they look the same, but their diets are very different. Once we supplied him a diet that worked, our caterpillar grew and hatched into a beautiful swallowtail butterfly, coincidentally on my best friend's son's wedding day, and we released it at the wedding, which was beautiful. So that made me wonder about how many times in our work and in our lives we've seen someone, and with the very best of intention, have offered advice or direction without fully thinking first. Do we assume others are in the wrong spot when they're really where they're meant to be all along? I truly believe we all do this work with the very best of intention, wanting to make things better, wanting to help people. Perhaps so we can look to hold space for learning from families about what actually works best for them, without exhausting ourselves and often them in the process before trying to make things different. Cajoling someone to eat milkweed when all they thrive on is dill will never work, no matter how passionately we believe in it or how beautifully we present it. Families are unique and strong and capable of blossoming all on their own with the tools they already have. Sometimes just sitting beside others through small changes of their choosing, is enough to bring rise to amazing transformations which are already within them. I thank you again for this word, and I'm really grateful for everyone who does this work alongside me. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Let's clap it up for Claire. Who knew such a powerful story would come out of caterpillars and butterflies? And my mother is actually terrified of caterpillars. So I'm going to have to tell her next time she sees a caterpillar and she's scared, there's a story there. Okay. There's a powerful one. So thank you, Claire. We appreciate you. We acknowledge you, honor you. And we are now going to move on to the next awardee. Our next award recognizes an individual who's leading and innovating system of care at the state, tribal, or territorial level. We were looking for leaders that authentically engage and partner across systems to improve mental health outcomes for children. And this year's champion, Beth Jordan, was nominated for being a strident voice for all stakeholders, to include those with lived experience at the table, beginning with planning, as they are the true experts. So her nominators wrote about Beth that Beth is foundational to the Commonwealth of Kentucky's system of care. Her work impacts thousands via agency partnerships to provide community and evidence-based support services and resources for those facing substance use and mental health challenges. Beth helps people realize change is possible. Change is possible, even in overloaded systems. So join me as we welcome Beth to the virtual stage. Beth, take it away.
Thank you so much. I have a few hard acts to follow, so I'll do my best. But Like everyone else, I'd love to thank NTAC and the nomination team. I really appreciate the opportunity to accept this award. I'm so humbled that I'm feeling really, really awkward about this entire thing. So just going to put that out there. But what I really want to focus on is the people who got me there. And those are my family, of course, and my friends and my coworkers and my team, which I'm going to talk about again in a few minutes. But um, really appreciating the work of the people that did this before I did and set the stage for the system of care framework to have evolved and improved so much over the last almost 40 years, which seems insane to even say 40 years of this happening. Um, I cannot say enough about my children's team and my other colleagues. I tell them almost every opportunity I get that without them I would not be able to do what I do because they make it happen. I just get to bask in their amazingness. They're eager to learn, caring, and compassionate, and they truly want to support children, youth, and families, all children, youth, and families, and having safe, happy, and healthy lives and communities. I guess my lesson for people with the system of care work is that it's 100% okay to not know something and ask and admit that you don't know it. It's a hard lesson for some of us. You feel like you have to be the expert. It's not possible in anything, especially in something as complex as the system of care framework. What I've tried to do to combat my inadequacies of knowledge is build a team that includes people who've worked in all the different aspects of the system of care. So I work in the Department for Mental Health. And in the past, we always hired mental health staff, which is great. It's important. That's having mental health clinicians is critical, but it's also important to me to have people who have worked in child welfare, education, childcare, persons, both youth and adults with lived experience in the system with mental health and substance use, public health, justice, and people with expertise in program development and service delivery, as well as receiving services, having received services, and those who excel in the aspects of system of care relevant to infrastructure building. And a lot of this is not the things that come naturally to clinicians or people that came through that path, like finance, evaluation, advocacy, policy development. Those were not my, they're not my skills. So I try to find people that have those. One of my mentors once said, the work of children's behavioral health is collaboration. And I have remembered that for over 20 years and encourage anyone else starting on this amazing path to do the same. Build a diverse team and surround yourself with smart, dedicated, creative people who bring a wide range of perspectives to the table. And that's what I've tried to do. No one person or agency can do it alone. So you've got your local team, you have fabulous national experts. Find your people and surround yourself with their good work. Thank you.
I was just trying to type that quotable moment in the chat, Beth. Find your people and surround yourself with their good work. I love it. And Beth, I just want to say that your team has been so excited about you receiving this award. I'm going to get you the chat, but you need to go through the chat. They have been dying to be here to celebrate you. Our final award is given to a whole organization that is modeling excellence in authentic engagement, healing-centered services, and developing partnerships across systems to build stronger and more equitable systems of support. You're going to get to see not one, but two representatives from our star organization, Centro Unido Latino Americano, or CULA. I hope that's how I'm saying your acronym. You can correct me when we let you on stage. They were nominated for their stigma busting and community-centered mental health programming. Their nominators wrote, CULA met a need in the community after noticing lack of mental health training, services, and supports available in Spanish. CULA sprang into service, certifying other Spanish language leaders in suicide prevention and mental health promotion campaigns. Sorry, Gay, this is going to be a lot. Youth mental health first aid, QPR, etc. CULA has made a wide range of programs to strengthen and empower not only the Latino-Latina community, but all of McDowell County's children, youth, and families. And what stuck out to me when I read the nomination is that they said they never say no to a need and are welcoming to all. Accepting this award this year on behalf of the organization are Carlos Lopez and Rosalinda Ariola. Welcome to the stage, Carlos and Rosalinda. You can unmute your microphone and share any remarks or teachable moments.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, just want to start off by saying a big thank you to everyone on the SOC System of Care Award, committee. And it's just an honor to be able to reach such heights as far as the work that we're doing surrounding mental health with families, youth, young adults, and adults alike too. So big thank you to everyone who is involved. Also, a big thank you to everyone who just presented their teaching moments as well. I think that we all have something to learn from there. And if I had something to offer as well, as far as what we've learned, is that empathy can go a really long way, especially whenever you're working with people who have experienced traumas, generational, cultural, and even traumas that just arise from normal day-to-day things that we experience. So it's essential to creating that rapport, and especially when you're giving direct service like we do on a day-to-day basis to the community. And so the two concepts that I have to offer to everyone is one, popular education. Popular education allows us to see every individual and consider them and their needs and their strengths, weaknesses alike, to be able to meet the needs and peel back all the layers possible to be able to create a cohesive support system for them, as well as healing circles. And healing circles offer a space where people who have experienced trauma allow them to connect more with their spirituality through community and through a healing journey that they embark on individually, but with the support, of course, of the community too. So these two concepts go hand in hand together and are really essential to creating what was one thing that I heard from a really great mentor of ours, is that whenever you have those two and you work cohesively together with them, that creates common unity, and which eventually results in community overall too. So whether it's going into a high school to teach teen mental health first aid, or giving trainings to our partners for youth mental health first aid, or the Spanish virtual therapy that we are able to offer for community members who don't speak proper English and are able to express themselves in the language that they are more connected to, these are two concepts that we normally carry with us everywhere we go, especially whenever we're giving that direct service to the community members that we serve. But aside from that direct service too, these are our methods of combating a system that keeps division out there, and also keeps people underprivileged communities in specific from being able to gather resources and be able to have equitable health care or access to mental health services in this situation too. So those two are the two sides of the coin. One is direct service, and one is the devotion to seeking out ways to combat the system that we are all a part of too. So just one more time, a big thank you to everyone involved, and it is a huge honor for us to be able to receive this award. And big shout out to the rest of the team. We're a team of about 10 or 11, I think, and their work is just incredible, and it helps us to really put our work out there and meet the goals of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My heart is full, y'all. My heart is full. We have had a wonderful 3 days with all of you. And I just can't say thank you enough to everyone that helped us pull this together. We pulled this summit together with Family Voice, with youth and young adults, our staff, all of our partners. We all came together to pull this summit together. And it doesn't have to be the end, right? We have training events throughout the year. And this isn't goodbye, it's just see you later, right? And how about May 23rd? We actually have a training coming up talking more about ACEs and preventing ACEs in a school environment. So we hope that you can join us. Click that view our schedule button, and you can see all of the trainings that we have scheduled this month throughout the rest of the summer. I again just want to say thank you to everyone, the whole team. Thank you to you for being here. And we cannot wait to see you next year. Make sure you please fill out the feedback form so we can learn how to improve upon the summit next year and continue to bring you content, information, speakers that you want to hear from. And I can't say thank you enough. We do this for you, and we're glad that you're here. So until next year and until next time, I hope you have a wonderful.
Bye. Oh, I was trying to say bye with you, Ashley. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
That's all, folks. This is the summit. You made it. Enjoy the view.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care. Bye.